Okay, friends, hi. Here we are, continuing in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. We have just finished the Laws of the Soul commentary, webinar commentary number 11, and we finished with the Law of Magnetic Impulse. I made some commentary on that in relation to the last pages of a treatise on cosmic fire, and also now in this more specific psychology book, the two fiery balls and the triangle. It seems to relate specifically to the head center and the ajna center. The triangle to the connection of those two centers with the alta major center eventually. Also, there's a sense in which those two fiery balls can also be related to the sign Libra, where we have the two parts of the scale, the two lobes of the ajna center, and a reconciling point between them where they cross. Now we will be moving into number 12, beginning with page 118. And this is the law of service. It's kind of interesting. The first law, the law of sacrifice, had a relationship not only to the fourth ray, but to the first ray. The second law, in numerical order, has a relationship to the second ray. And the third law will be seen as related primarily to the sixth ray and to Pisces, but also, interestingly enough, to the third ray, which is closely related to the sixth. 2 3s making 6, and service so often relating to outer action. Love, the second aspect, in action, service. It's sometimes said that goodwill is love in action, and those who are animated by goodwill are those who serve. So service is carrying out the realization of the inner planes with beneficent effect onto the outer planes. The law of service, and this actually goes on for quite a while, almost 30 pages. Its exoteric name is the law of service, and esoterically, the law of water and the fishes. The fishes are the souls immersed in form, in matter, and water is matter, and how shall they be redeemed from their imprisonment within the waters of life, especially here within the lower 18 subplanes. Interestingly enough, a number summing to 9, so we have the third law related to the sixth ray, and its particular arena of application is in the sphere related to the third ray, whose number is 9. 1 and 8 are 9. The symbol, the man with the pot of water, and the pot of water is balanced on his head, and this is, I think, this is discussed in Cosmic Fire and maybe also a little bit later. It is outpouring energy from the of the waters of life, are pouring out from the great abundance of the developed head center. The sixth ray is related to this outpouring, and it animates, it vivifies, it stimulates. It's a bit like the energy of the Holy Spirit. There are some collections here from a treatise on cosmic fire, and we see the symbol here, a picture on the head of a man. So that is a slightly different view of the symbol, and here is another one, a picture of water balanced on the head of a man standing in the form of a cross. The man is standing in the form of a cross. It is this law which brings in the energy symbolized by the sign Aquarius, and this law is the governing factor of the Aquarian age. So the law of service and the water bearer, the symbols are very similar, but the additional poise is there. It might be added that the symbol for law 2 was the origin of the balance or the scales of the sign Libra. That's the two fiery balls and the triangle. But in the course of the ages, its true form was distorted, so not all the astrological signs can be traced to the symbols, and only a few can be traced back as far as the Master's ashram. All right, so these are additional statements, and I believe, let's see, I want to, I wonder if an astrological sign is associated here. Let's go into Esoteric Psychology 2, and the place where the law of service would be discussed, probably Esoteric Psychology 2, page 118 or so. We do not see the sign Pisces here, but since water and the fishes are involved, it will be involved as well as Aquarius, and we do realize that there is an overlap between the two constellations, Aquarius and Pisces, through that area of the constellation which is called the band in the sign, in the constellation Pisces. So there is some sort of a synthetic union between these two signs, and this particular law, which is going to be the important law of the Aquarian age, where we have this outpouring energy, will also have some sort of connection with the sign Pisces, which is ruled, incidentally, by the sixth ray. And we also have to think of the idea that many Aquarian people are animated by a strong idealism, which connects to the sixth ray. So we have a kind of fusion here of the sign Pisces with the fishes and a symbol similar to that of the water carrier. All right, vivifying energy, and we know the electric vitality of the etheric body associated with Pisces, with Aquarius, and we know that the vivification of the etheric body is one of the objectives of progress during the Aquarian age. So there is a kind of electrification here, the energy of the Holy Spirit. The third aspect of divinity is related in a way to the third vehicle, beginning with the mind, first vehicle, astral, second vehicle, and then the etheric body, the third vehicle. Hence the third law, the vivifying energy and the association of the Holy Spirit with the etheric vehicle. And of course, Aquarius, associated with this law as well, is an outpouring energy. It's not a centralizing energy, it's a decentralizing energy. And the energy goes forth to all, making possible the circulation of life and vitality to all. All right, let's see what we have. Whoop, that's not what I want. I'm going to make the the red symbol. All right. And ready to go. We come now to the consideration of the third law of the soul. You know, whenever we have the number 3, something involving manifestation, the lowest of the 3 aspects, will be needed. We have the will, we have love, and then we have intelligence, and intelligence is connected with the arrangement to manifest. We come now to consideration of the third law of the soul, which is intended to govern all soul activity. Notice the word activity there as well, because it's the third aspect connected with activity. It is the law of service. However, before we elaborate this theme, there are 3 things which merit our careful attention. Okay. First is the fact that the result of all contact achieved in meditation and the measure of our success will be determined by the ensuing service to the race. In other words, it's not for the accumulation of knowledge, it's not for special experiences of a transcendental kind that we meditate. All of these have to be turned towards the improvement of our conditions in the lower worlds. Otherwise, they are merely a form of self-indulgence. If there is right understanding, there will necessarily be right action. The necessity of service will be seen. I think maybe this is a little too big. Okay, we'll bring this back here to maybe 16. Yes, the the necessity to serve will be seen. Okay, this is this is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for right, the necessity for service will be seen and understood. Okay. Because it will be seen that there is a connection between the higher planes and the lower, and that the higher must work out upon the lower, and that service is the means by which these higher energies take form within the configuration of the lower world. If there is so if there is no action, no serviceable action resulting from one's studies, from one's meditation, from one's so-called spiritual life, then there is not right understanding of that which has been contacted, that which has been meditated upon, that which has been studied. It has previously been pointed out that the three great sciences which will come to the fore in the new age, and obviously here the Age of Aquarius, okay, right. So the three great sciences, and which will lead humanity from the unreal to the real and from aspiration to realization, both interestingly related to Sagittarius, which begins with aspiration and ends with intuitive realization. The three great sciences of the scientific fifth ray, Aquarian age, fifth ray as well as of the seventh ray, are the science of meditation, the coming science of the mind and how the mind may be illumined by the higher energies, that of the soul and beyond, the science of the Antaskarana, or the science of the bridging which must take place between higher and lower mind, and that's just the beginning of the Antaskarana. Lower mind, of course, occurs on the fourth level. The height of lower mind is on the fourth level of the mental plane, and the beginning of the anchoring of the Antaskarana in the spiritual triad is the monastic permanent atom, or that of the higher mind. So the science of the Antaskarana and the science of service. Meditation, the Antaskarana or Antakarana, depending on how one wants to pronounce it, and service, which is a definite technique of at-one-ment. At one point, DK says, in effect, it's better to serve than to meditate. Service calls upon all the resources of the higher self in a way that nothing else does, no other method does. So in the extremity of service, our internal resources are called forth and made available to us in a way that really brings the plan into manifestation. Really, the science of the Antakarana is kind of an extension of the science of meditation, or at least a certain subcategory within it. Meditation is a very large area. The science of the Antaskarana is about bridging in several phases, the first of which is between the personality and the soul itself, the second of which is between the personality and the triadal self, and eventually the monad. Right, we have to make these things real to ourselves. So let's put them down, just so that we can see. It is, whoop. Okay. So it is meditation. This is amazing. It keeps on relapsing to finish, and I don't know why, but I have an idea of what to do. So perhaps I'll do it this way. That was the problem. Now, English US. Okay. The intricacies of these things. Okay, let's see if I can. And then from English US, we will go to English UK, set as default, and English US, and let's make this English UK. Sorry for this little delay, but my computer has me wondering about my own sanity here, certainly about my ability to negotiate all of these methods involved with MS Word. All right, hopefully this works. So what I want to put down here is the idea of meditation, the Antaskarana, and service. Three aspects of the three great sciences to emerge. Maybe we can even look at these in sort of a first ray, second ray, and third ray manner. Meditation in general, when linked with meditation, study, and service, takes up the position of the first ray. The Antaskarana is a bridging activity, so it's a relational activity, and it relates to poles, hence the second ray, and service, the activity on the outer plane whereby the higher energies are expressed. We shall now consider the broad outlines of this science of service, for it is the major releasing factor in the disciple's life. I think we really have to take this to heart. Service is this. So if we find, I'm sure we've all experienced that suppose we get involved within ourselves and somehow feel less than expansive and our contact is not as high as it should be, we find that engaging in service is immediately uplifting. This is something that anybody can try for himself, and we'll discover it to be the case. So the major releasing factor in the disciple's life. Secondly, this law of service is something that may not be escaped. Well, we have these petals of the egoic lotus, and the third, interestingly enough, the third of every tier of petals is the petal of sacrifice. You see the connection? Third of every petal of the egoic lotus is a petal of sacrifice. Okay. Whoop, that's not SACR, perhaps. Petal of sacrifice. So in this petal of sacrifice and in the various activities which are compelled by it or demanded within it, the process of service is encountered and will lead to sacrifice. First may become servitude, and then service, and then servitude or unwilling sacrifice, then voluntary service leading to complete sacrifice eventually. The sacrifice of all forever, as it is said in relation to the ninth petal of the egoic lotus. So secondly, this law of service is something which may not be escaped. Evasion brings its penalties, if that evasion is conscious. It's a question of Saturn, consciousness, the third ray. We are not karmically responsible for that which we do when we are not conscious, at least not in the fullest sense of the word. There may be consequences to that which we do, which is against the law, and of which we are not conscious. But the penalties, as here described, are not applied except to a conscious being. So evasion brings its penalties if that evasion is conscious. Ability to serve marks a definite stage of advance upon the path. Let's just note that. And until that stage is reached, spontaneous service, notice the word spontaneous, it's without calculation and deliberation, and this is the difference between the will to love and simply loving. DK makes much of this in the Discipleship book. At first he wants to burn all of us up in the will to love, but then beyond the will to love is the spontaneous loving. So many good habits have gone into creating that spontaneity, and it occurs without halt, without deliberation, without hesitation. So until this stage is reached, this ability to serve, spontaneous service rendered in love and guided by wisdom, notice how both are necessary, cannot be given. I want to somehow emphasize both of those, because, we'll know when we have arrived, when we do not have to deliberate upon whether we will serve or not, but when it is a spontaneous reaction or response. And we know that, in fact, service is really a kind of radiation. What is found up to that time is good intention, mixed motives, because the personality is pulling in one way and the soul in another, and oft fanaticism, a kind of determination to go one way which one thinks is right, forcing one's way forward regardless of the protests of the vehicles which are being forced. And this we will later elucidate. Well, there's nothing wrong with good intentions if they do not pave the road to hell, as it is said. But we must begin with good intentions, but we have not yet reached the point where there is a marked ability to serve. It takes much practice, I suspect. And the soul must be radiating, because service is essentially a soul radiation. I remember when I was reading these words at first, maybe some more than 40 years ago, maybe 43 years ago, and they were certainly new ideas to me at the time. I had been trained in theosophy and a more academic approach, and here comes this very practical psychological approach from a great sage. Well, I'm thinking back upon those days and hopefully have incorporated in some of what then seemed so remarkable. This law is the imposition upon the planetary rhythm of certain energies and impulses which emanate from that sign of the zodiac into which we are steadily moving. So we might say that Aquarius is at the root of this law. We are steadily moving into the sign Aquarius, and gradually form is adapting accordingly. There is already an established planetary rhythm, but it changes every time we move. The whole entire planet moves constellationally into a new, it says sign of the zodiac. It's really in relation to a constellation of the zodiac with which the vernal equinox is aligning. Interesting thing is that when the vernal equinox is aligning with, let us say, the end of Aquarius, Constellation Aquarius at springtime, however we may want to measure those constellations, they're not equally 30 degrees, but let us imagine they are, then that same vernal equinox will be in the sign Aries. It will align constellationally with Aquarius and yet be in the sign Aries, tropically considered. That's sometimes difficult to understand, but diagrams, I think, help us. The signs are related particularly to the ecliptic, to the so-called sun's path around the earth, really the earth's path around the sun, and the actual coming in of the precessional energy, in this case the growing energy of Aquarius, relates to the stars and not to the signs. So because we are all going to be conditioned by Aquarius during the next 2,000 years or so, there will be no escape. That imposition, if it's occurring in a planetary sense, will certainly occur upon, in relation to all of us as tiny little cells within the being of the planetary logos. So, the imposition of the will of God comes, and it's a noble thing, we're told, when studying the political workers, to be an agent of the imposition of the will of God. And it seems the planetary logos has no choice here but to acquiesce. Of course, at his stage, naturally he wants to acquiesce to the incoming imposition of energies from the constellation, from the great Lord of the constellation Aquarius. It is the effect of this force which in some countries is regimenting the masses. Now, it's not only the seventh ray energy, which is regimentation. There is that, and as we see in its relation to Aries, a very regimenting sign, but Aquarius is a leveler as well. It's an equalizer. It puts all upon the same playing field, and then perhaps a meritocracy, a true meritocracy, can emerge. But let's just remember this, that Aquarius is a regimenting sign, a leveler, an equalizer. And that is not always good, because then individual distinction and accomplishment is sometimes flattened, and all are seen at the same level, which of course is a fallacy. Due to reincarnation, people, though equal in spirit, are manifesting in their causal nature and their personalities very differently on a hierarchical level. So, in Russia, which is ruled in its soul by Aquarius, there was a great regimentation of the masses. And although Germany was not an Aquarian country, the Nazi Party was an Aquarian organization and led to regimentation, the subservience of the individual to the state. And even in the marches, the marching manner of the German soldiers, we saw this regimentation powerfully exhibited. So the effect of this this sign of the zodiac impressing itself, its rhythm impressing itself upon the planetary rhythm, resulted in regimentation in some cases. That's the first and lower response to the energy, in such a way that the individual serves the group by a forced negation of his personal self. Well, to a degree, you can see that in every third petal of the egoic lotus, because although it's unconscious in the first tier of petals and increasingly conscious in petal 6 and petal 9, there is something being imposed there that forces the negation of the personal self, but eventually the personal self acquiesces to that forcing instead of fighting against it. So the state is everything in the fascistic and communistic systems, and the individual was seen as a minor unit and forced to conform. I think we see this a lot in North Korea at the present time. There's such a regimentation of the people, and they're all forced to conform not only to the state but to the idolized rulers of the state. It's a fairly primitive way of organizing society, and why that particular country should be the focus of that particular form of intense regimentation, well, maybe time will reveal. China is no longer, it used to be more so, it seems no longer to be the case. So the individual serves the group by a forced negation of his personal self, his own ideas, his own personal, well, think about the little red book, the red book of Mao. One's own ideas did not count, One could be accused of revisionism, going against the party line, going against the ideas and ideals of the great helmsman, So this is really totalitarian, this is impositional. But anyway, his own ideas, his own personal well-being, and his own individuality are subordinated to the whole. I guess eventually it should be this way, but it should be through an act of will. It should be acquiescence and intelligently accomplished. And he is rendered relatively futile from the angle of his soul unfoldment, and this is probably the case in certain of those countries where soul progress is more difficult to make. There was a time the Tibetan was saying in Germany, and I guess particularly in Germany, but maybe, I think particularly there, that it was not possible for disciples to take birth. They would have been completely negated by the imposed fascistic Nazi forces, the forces of evil expressed through that country. So there would have been no soul expression. It would have been entirely stifled, although there were good people, of course, within that country, and as they emerged, they suffered for it. He is forced to conform, and interestingly, Saturn does rule Aquarius as well as Uranus. Interesting there. We just because it's the old ruler doesn't mean we can dispose of it. He is forced to conform willingly or unwillingly to group conditions. The group can be tyrannical, we have seen in certain countries, because it has no respect for real distinction. The group becomes tyrannical. Under Leo, real distinctions emerge. Of course, eventually those two signs interplay, and what is true of one becomes true of the other. They become almost like one sign, Leo Aquarius. But the dead level of the group can pretty well stifle excellence. And, it's called in some countries the tall poppy syndrome. If you as a poppy are emerging in full glory, along comes the scythe and cuts you off. The scythe of group compulsion, group conformity. So he is forced to conform willingly or unwillingly to group conditions. This is one of the lowest manifestations of the impact of this law upon the human consciousness, and, DK seems to be saying, and there are other low manifestations. So it's one of the lowest. It really stifles all that is distinct, unique, individual, hard won over many lives, longing for expression, because its expression will really be the expression of the will of God in some aspect. So it does stifle. This totalitarian approach can be found in Aquarius, interestingly, and it can stifle the will of God emerging through the individual. So we do have to be careful in the Aquarian age about totalitarian presentations of governmental forms and also of religious forms, where we trust that the incoming science will demonstrate to the religious fanatics that they are missing something, and that there's a deeper way to understand the religious experience. It's already happening, of course, but some regressive or retrogressive groups are not catching the idea. In its highest expression, the imposition of this Aquarian energy, we have the service rendered upon the planet in all the kingdoms of nature by the hierarchy of masters. So they too, we do realize that the number of the initiate is 11, and Aquarius, the 11th, the 11th sign is the sign of hierarchy, just as the new group of world servers is ruled by Taurus. And, we can find all 12 signs in Shambhala, but it has those first ray signs quite strongly. It has Aries, it has Leo, it has Capricorn, it has, of course, Taurus as well, demonstrating through first ray Vulcan. Between these two extreme expressions, there is a vast distinction. So just imagine coming along thinking that Aquarius, it's such a lovely sign, so interpreting all things Aquarian in terms of its best expression, and ignoring the fact that there may be compulsion, conformity, and regimentation involved in the Aquarian experience, and when the law of service is first imposed. Could be called, in a way, the law of servitude, couldn't it? Between these two extreme expressions there is a vast distinction, but both are equally brought about by response, the one consciously rendered and the other unconsciously directed. Okay, the unconscious forces are directed here to response to the law of service. And in general, we would say, and to the Aquarian energy. These things are all tied together. Aquarius, the water server, the man carrying the pitcher of water on his shoulders or in his hands, compared to the man poised carrying it on his head, through which the waters of life can be willfully and deliberately and without interference distributed from the head center. Okay, now we come to the third. After talking so much, one wonders what the second and the first were. So let's go back. Secondly, it cannot be escaped, okay, because of the imposition. And first, that everything that happens in meditation, our success in meditation, will be determined by the ensuing degree of service to the race. And thirdly, this law of service was expressed for the first time fully by the Christ 2,000 years ago. I mean, he's saying in a way that the Buddha's great presentation was not a full expression of the law of service. Well, when you, yeah, why should that be? Well, perhaps the Buddha's contact with the people per se was not as full as the Christ's through Jesus. The Buddha worked with his disciples, his arhats, and of course with some of the more average human beings, but mostly with those who are already on the path. So the law of service expressed for the first time by the Christ, and he is one who manages to unite the Aquarian and Piscean energies. The Pisces energy may be, in a way, the greatest of the second ray energies, and it is most associated with the Christ, just as Scorpio with Hercules and Taurus with the Buddha. So he, the Christ, with his chosen 5,000-year bodhisattvaship, whereas the usual term of office is only 2,500, he was the forerunner of the Aquarian age. So he entered with certain, I think, Aquarian tendencies during the age of Pisces. Again, that overlap between the two signs. He was the forerunner of the Aquarian age, and hence his constant emphasis upon the fact that he was the water of life, a great agent of distribution, and the living water which men needed. When you look at water, it's Piscean. When you look at that which lives, it's Aquarian. Living water is like the link between Aquarius and Pisces. Okay, so like the link between Aquarius and Pisces. Water of life coming from the cosmic ethers, and of course the Christ consciousness was focused on those high triadal levels, even though he was able to manage expression in the most mundane spheres and in the most spiritual way. So emphasis upon water and life. Of course, water is the symbol for matter, but in another way, it's the symbol for outpouring energy. Matter is found on the cosmic etheric planes and on the cosmic dense planes. And if it's matter, it's water. So there's living water coming from the higher four planes, higher four of them, and then the less animated water of the dense physical body of the solar logos and planetary logos. So hence the esoteric name of this law is that of the water and the fishes. Now, the water in one way is the water in which they swim, the waters of the lower cosmic physical plane, so they are the waters of imprisonment in a way. But here we deal with higher waters. And the waters of the cosmic etheric planes, and the manner in which these higher or living waters vitalize those who are still swimming in the lower waters. those who are still swimming in the lower waters, the waters of the dense physical body of the solar logos and the planetary logos. So, as I've tried to suggest, certainly the dense physical body of the solar logos comprises 21 subplanes, and the egoic lotus is still within those lower subplanes, the lower dense physical vehicle. Maybe from the planetary perspective, its dense physical body may well not include the causal planes of the mental plane, but just the lower 18 subplanes. That has yet to be established, and it's hinted, I think, in the books, but I don't think any completely definite statement is made. So this is the law of water and the fishes. The fishes nourished by the living water. Fishes nourished spiritually by the living water. The Piscean age, slowly, very slowly, prepared the way for the divine expression of service, meaning that perhaps in the beginning days, that which is now recognized as service was not so easy to render, especially among the vaster groups of human beings. Here and there, of course, there were individual disciples, initiates, who could do so. So Pisces is a sign of sacrifice, and sacrifice is involved in the difficult task of service. TK tells us how difficult it is and that it's not easy at all. Excuse me. So slowly the way was prepared for the divine expression of service, and that divine expression which will be the glory of the coming centuries, and we want to say in the Aquarian age. In the Aquarian age, the glory of service will emerge. Something for which the Age of Pisces prepared, just as the Christ during the Age of Pisces was preparing for his great externalized role in the processional Age of Aquarius. He was with humanity perhaps only for 3 years through the Master Jesus, although he may have been educating the Master Jesus before that, but 3 years in terms of his emerged mission. And when he returns, it will be for centuries in the Aquarian age. We don't know exactly when he'll return. So much of this depends upon our own work. Some people have said, well, it'll be 2025. Some people have said it's already happened. That, of course, I think is nonsense because the requirements have not been fulfilled. And will it be in the 21st century? Well, it could be. We don't know. At such a time as we know not, in such a place as we know not, it will come. It will happen. Many things have to be accomplished first, and the hierarchy itself and the disciples have to be recognized before it's possible for the Christ truly to return. Anyway, his time with humanity will be vast compared to the earlier appearance. It could be 2,000 years. It will probably be to the end of the Age of Aquarius. And if it occurs in the next few centuries, well, we're dealing with 2,000 years or almost 2,000 years. So really, it's been a time of preparation for him in ways we cannot fathom. But he will intend to externalize the hierarchy and create an entirely new civilization. Well, so the Piscean age slowly, very slowly, prepared the way for the divine expression of service. So far we don't have this on any massed scale, but which teacher was it? Was it Moria, or was it, maybe it was Moria, I think, who said the time will come when men will compete with each other to see who can offer greater service. I think that's very interesting. It will be the glory of the coming centuries, and perhaps we mean all the way through the Age of Aquarius. We certainly cannot conceive of the glory receding when Venus becomes the ruler of the last decanate of Aquarius. It is a glorious planet, the brightest planet from our earthly perspective, and its ascendant will indicate a great glory for humanity, which will increasingly be ruled by the solar angel and by Venus, which sponsors the solar angel. Today we have a world which is steadily coming to the realization that no man liveth unto himself. It's easy to remain in a convinced state of isolation when you do not have the modern communication system. But just think of how the fifth ray has united people, bringing in the telegraph, the telephone, the camera, the modern camera anyway, and the computer, the telecommunications system, television, so forth. We really realize directly that we can have an immediate effect upon anyone, anywhere in the world. More indirectly, if we're not directly connected to them by one of these telecommunication devices, and directly, were we to just simply speak to them or write something to them, an immediate effect. So maybe it's hard to imagine, but at all times and all places we are affecting each other. And even though we think we're affecting only the people in our nearest environment, the waves of our energy expressed are going out and affecting far more than those in the immediate circumstance. So, no man liveth unto himself, and that only as the love about which so much has been written and spoken, perhaps not done, I would say, not so much expressed, finds its outlet and service, can man begin to measure up to his innate capacity. So, if we want to know the real mode of progress for us individually and for all of us collectively, love and serve. Seems so, platitudinous, but then what is a platitude but a great truth which has been not been realized or has been incompletely realized. I think real advancement on the path of spirituality for the individual and humanity is a simple thing. Not an easy thing, but a simple thing. It occurs when we adhere to the fundamental principles about which so much has been spoken and so little performed. Sometimes we as disciples, especially of the more, mental type, have a problem with that. Okay, we had one of those little spontaneous dropping of the connection. Cause unknown. Yeah, but now it's working again. So, love and serve. So simple, and yet so difficult at times. I think Master Moria speaks of which do you prefer, simplicity or complexity? And he says always choose simplicity. I guess we have to be able to master both, or to have so much simplicity in our understanding that we can negotiate, we can navigate the complexity expeditiously, instead of being caught in it, caught in our own web of complexity, as the spider is not. The sign for the Aquarian age is that of a man carrying on his shoulders. Talk about shouldering responsibility, standing shoulder to shoulder. The principle of heavy work is involved here. Shouldering a jar of water so full that it pours over to all and sundry, and yet it is diminished not. Is it well directed? Sometimes you see the water carrier, water bearer, directing the water where needed. The image the DK gives us, it seems to be pouring over, and just by the very fact that the man is who he is, I suppose the waters of life will pour forth from him, but it doesn't seem as well directed as it might be. There are also images of the water bearer who is holding the pot of water, and he is pouring it forth in a deliberate manner where it is needed. And I suppose once we get into the law of service, where the urn is upon the head, there is a very conscious and willful direction of the water where it is needed, but it seems to go in all directions and serve everyone. The sign for this law of service is very similar. How would we know this except from the archives which the Tibetan has given us? The sign for this law of service is very similar, but the difference lies in this, that the man stands perfectly balanced in the form of a cross, which he has learned to exemplify through service and sacrifice. He can be the cross, and he is disengaged from the cross of matter, and yet stands in the form of a cross, which is sacrificial and outpouring, with the two hands pouring out. The head pours out as well, and the feet ground him. The man stands perfectly balanced in the form of a cross, with arms stretched out, and with the water pot upon his head. In this difference there lies much of real significance. It's a much more poised position. It seems more natural in a way, although hardly one, I suppose. There's much more effort, and of the third aspect in the water carrier image. In the law of service, we have one of those archetypal figures, the cross and the, well, it's interesting what is placed upon the head. Sometimes in the old hieroglyphics, a throne will be placed upon the head, indicating the true master, the true initiate. Different jars are placed upon the head. It indicates what consummation has occurred, what the man has achieved. So the idea of perfect balance is here. Interestingly, the third ray, third law related to Libra, the sign of balance, a great distributor of the third ray, and whose constellational configuration is that of a triangle in the sky. The triangle being particularly the figure of balance. In this difference there lies much of real significance. The jar of water posed upon the shoulders is the sign of the burden of service. Well, if you're going to carry burdens, lift things, through the shoulder, great lifting can occur. It's the symbol of being able to do heavy work, to shoulder responsibility, to carry upon the shoulders. It is not easy to serve. And DK keeps emphasizing this because people have maybe a different idea that serving is constantly a great joy with no heavy labor or sacrifice of time and interest involved. But he corrects our opinion on this. It's a sign of the burden of service. It's not easy to serve. Man is only beginning to learn how to serve. Remember that Saturn is one of the rulers of Aquarius, the sign of service. Saturn, the planet of work and responsibility. The jar of water upon the head of the man who has been upon the cross of sacrifice so long that the position has become to him perfectly natural. Maybe the fixed cross, really, considering it as the first cross of sacrifice, indicates that the cross which has upheld him for so long has now disappeared, that he is the cross. He is the cross and can serve within the cross of matter. It's interesting how standing, you can be nailed to the cross, but at the same time standing in the form of a cross, you can see, how receptive of the will it is, and how greatly it allows one to pour forth all that one is through the hands, maybe through the feet to the earth, and certainly from the head, which is the synthesis of all that has been achieved. So only one can really perform this, in connection with the law of service, perform in accordance with the law of service, who has for a long time been on the cross of sacrifice. The man with the water jar upon his head indicates to us poise, equilibrium, and balance. Almost seems to, in a way, connect with Libra, but then so does the previous law. For this balance, the understanding of the law of magnetic impulse has prepared him, and let us say the law of magnetic impulse is a Libran law. Maybe also a Capricornian law in a certain interesting way because of the idea of the triangle and the three centers in the head. Anyway, Saturnian, the third ray, Capricorn, Libra, all of them are involved with those three centers in the head, which make of a man an initiate. But now he has served because he has been magnetically impulsed by the soul in individual and in group formation, and under such an impulse he definitely adopts that cross-like position and serves within the cross of matter. He no longer has to be upheld by the scaffolding. He now assumes that position of upright, balanced, poised service naturally. That is the law of polar union, and its symbol is the originator of the zodiacal sign for the constellation Libra, balance and service. So, and there is so much of loving understanding also expressed through Libra. We learn when we notice here, interestingly, page 333. Whoop, that's not going to do. So 333, and there is Libra, balance, attain, divine love, and understanding. The second ray aspect of Libra, not just the third ray. So here he does talk about the symbol connecting, the symbol of the law of magnetic impulse connecting with Libra. And so, you know, those two fiery balls, well, they do represent the head center and the agenus center, but from another perspective, you know, the agenus center is like Libra, and the two lobes, the two petals of that 96-petaled lotus, can stand for the fiery balls as well. So the law of polar union and its symbol is the originator of the zodiacal sign for the constellation Libra, balance and service. There is so much of Venus in Libra that we would expect the service as well. These are the two expressions of divinity which are today man's next great objective. Well, by that do we mean balance and service? Perhaps, or do we mean these two laws being the two expressions of divinity which are today man's next great objective, being able to connect in soul and being able to stand in a balanced manner and to serve. Okay. We're going to, yeah, it's almost 1 hour, but we're going to go on and make this closer, I think, to a 2-hour program. Well, we have to ponder on the distinction here. I think many of us are in the position where we have not yet stood long enough on the cross so that the cross may drop away and we have a perfectly poised expression of the law of service. We are serving, but we serve through great effort, and so maybe are more akin in that type of service to the earlier stages of the law of service, which are expressed by the usual image of the Aquarian server with the pot of water upon his shoulder. I suppose maybe his, well, maybe it's his right shoulder, as perhaps it's an act of will to serve, or holding it in his hands. But eventually we will achieve this position, which is really that of a true master who has, for whom the cross has dropped away. He has truly been crucified upon the cross, and the empty nail-marked hands are no longer holding anything for himself. Rather, they are agents of sharing, of distribution, of blessing, and his head is not cogitating about what he can do next as a personality, but it indicates a synthesis of upgathered energies which can be poured out in a perfect archetypal configuration for the benefit of all those that it touches. There is a very strong distributive idea here in this law of service. Aquarius is the great sign of distribution. You know how Aquarian people tend to broadcast what they are to all areas, indiscriminately almost. The sun shining upon the just and the unjust as well. So the idea of distribution for all, but perhaps in a wise and loving way, is indicated here in the law of service. One responds to Aquarius at a very early stage, in a negative manner. One does not respond to the law of service until one really can respond. It is not natural at first to distribute and to share. It is natural to ingather and to possess and to acquire. You can do that under Aquarius, but you can't really do that under the law of service. So, the man, poised in equilibrium, etc., etc. These are the two expressions of divinity which are today man's great objective. We're told that Libra is becoming strong in the planetary horoscope. If balance and service are the next laws to be achieved, the next objectives to be achieved, we are in good astrological condition for those objectives to be fulfilled, because Libra is becoming stronger in the planetary horoscope, independently of the fact that one might have to wait until the third decade of Libra of Aquarius before Libra is really strong. I mean, it is the Libran Venus decade, but even now and earlier in the planetary horoscope, the sign of balance is moving in, and certainly the sign of service is moving into power. That is the sign Aquarius in general. Yes, and we are moving on beyond the 1 hour. We are. Service is usually interpreted as exceedingly desirable, and it is seldom realized how very difficult service essentially is. This probably comes as a cold shower to many who are overly enthusiastic about the ease of service and how natural it may be. We do have to, after all, have to work against the tendency of the elementals, our lunar lords, if we're going to serve. It is seldom realized how very difficult service essentially is. It involves so much sacrifice of time and interest and of one's own ideas. Well, DK knows wherever he speaks. There's so many things that the masters could do that are of great interest to them, but they take their time, they take away from their normal interest, and they focus on a lesser sphere for the upliftment and the benefit of that sphere. Think of Sanat Kumara working under Saturn, who holds his post. Think of what else he might be doing, rather than waiting or watching for the last weary pilgrim to find his way home. Okay, so much sacrifice of time and of interest and of one's ideas. It requires exceedingly hard work because it necessitates deliberate effort, conscious wisdom, and the ability to work without attachment. Well, this should be emblazoned on the shield of all disciples. So we really understand what we're involved with here and do not glamorize the concept. We're sometimes told that what usually passes for service brings far more to the one who serves than to the one who is serving. So much sacrifice of time and of interest in one's own ideas, it requires exceedingly hard work because it necessitates effort, deliberate effort, the will, Saturn, choice, conscious wisdom, applied wisdom, we might say, applied to specific concrete circumstances, and the ability to work without attachment. In spite of all this, and yet, we will see, service is a form of soul radiation. So, to serve is to radiate, and yet there's a a conscious, deliberate, willful aspect involved in directing this radiation to the best advantage in the world according to the plan as one understands it. So we seldom realize, it is seldom realized how very difficult service essentially is. It's one of those hard sayings, isn't it? You know, you run into this and you are interested in becoming part of the esoteric movement, cooperating with hierarchy and so forth, and then you see that the road ahead is a difficult one, and even the joy of service is only earned through willingness to undergo the necessary difficulty. These qualities, sacrifice of time and interest and of one's own ideas, because sometimes other ideas are more important in the context. We can say that other ideas are sometimes more important and more effective in the service context. We cannot always be talking about the ways we prefer. And sometimes we simply have to conform to the ideas of our superiors, which have to be expressed, and they are not our own ideas. We have not created them, worked them up, etc. We have to simply adopt them and express them. Well, only those who actually are involved in the process know the reality of it. So these qualities are not easy of attainment by the average aspirant, may be easier for the trained disciple, let's hope, may be easier for the trained disciple. And yet today the tendency to serve is an attitude which is true of a vast majority of people in the world. That's a wonderful statement. The tendency to help and to serve, true of a vast majority, such has been the success of the evolutionary process. So, a reason for joy. And the vast majority are inclined to help. Maybe they have not reached that point discussed above where service is possible because of a certain stage upon the path, but the inclination to render service, to help another, is deeply established in the vast majority. That's a very positive statement, and I would say, very encouraging. Service is frequently regarded as an endeavor to bring people around to the point of view of the one who serves, because what the would-be server has found to be good and true and useful must necessarily be good and true and useful for all. Well, this would be imposition of the part upon the members of the whole. So, in a way, it's a kind of totalitarianism. Totalitarian has a particular point of view, the totalitarian attitude, totalitarian society, religion has a particular point of view which is to be imposed upon all, and all are to conform to it. So this is on the way to totalitarianism. What's good for me is good for you. There's a lack of psychology there because I have not studied you, and I don't know whether what's good for me is good for you. One can report one's own success or failure in such things and let the other individual decide, but to impose, well, we know that there are many idealists in the field of politics and religion and so forth who seek to impose upon others that which they have found to be good and true and useful. Service is viewed as something we render to the poor, the afflicted, the diseased, and the unhappy, because we think we want to help them. Little realizing that primarily this help is offered because we ourselves are made uncomfortable by the distressing conditions. Well, he's certainly not giving us a glamorous picture of service. Shall we agree? No glamorous picture of service here. So we are made uncomfortable by the distressing conditions and must therefore endeavor to ameliorate those conditions in order for ourselves to be comfortable again. So wrongly pursuing what we call service to sustain our own comfort. Well, maybe we hadn't thought about that. So the imposition and self-comfort, and thus the act of thus helping, releases us from our misery, even if we fail to release or relieve the sufferers. So these indeed are hard sayings. But since service is so important, and since the Aquarian age will be so much the age of service, it's very important that we have a deglamorized conception of what service really is. Otherwise, we simply perpetuate the old mistakes and think we are somehow really helping. A deep questioning of our own motives then will be required here. Why do I serve? Why do I help when I think I am helping? Why do I really do this? Anything we may consider to be service. And DK warns his disciples right at the outset. Look, you're gathered here together largely because you desire self-advancement, or you're excited by such an idea as contact with the Master and so forth. He basically is telling people that their original impulses towards service are more on the selfish side than on the selfless side. And until we really explore our motives within, maybe we will not understand that this is in fact the case. All right. Service is frequently an indication of a busy and overactive temperament. Notice again the connection with the third ray, right? Third law, third ray. Notice the connection. Or of a self-satisfied disposition. I feel quite good about my life, so why should you not share in that which has been so beneficial for me? Which leads its possessor to a strenuous effort to change situations and make them what he feels they should be. Not so interested in what may be the true intended expression of the ones to be served, thus forcing people to conform to that which the server feels should be done. Kind of an astral attitude is here indicated through the repeated use of the word feel. So again, we have a limited point of view. All points of view are limited, and we seek out of that point of view to correct circumstances as we think they should be corrected. This is not necessarily the attitude of the soul, which understands things more deeply and sees how they should be, so that those who are the recipients of service are really benefited, rather than imposed upon or simply reconditioned. So we can say that the reconditioning of others according to one's ideas is not necessarily service. Or again, service can grow out of a fanatical desire to tread in the footsteps of the Christ, that great Son of God who went about doing good, leaving an example that we should follow in his footsteps. Well, we are enjoined to imitate the Christ, Thomas à Kempis, so roundly endorsed by Master Moria, imitation of Christ. But there is here, there may be hidden here some spiritual ambition that one will rise in one's spiritual status if one does as the Christ does. The true heart motive is perhaps missing. And it's a bit of following. Well, he said to do it, so we do it. But the reason that he said to do it is not yet fully expressed in our hearts or understood in our minds. So people therefore serve from a sense of obedience and not from a spontaneous outgoing towards the needy. It does seem that the new Pope, here we are in 2014, has this spontaneous outgoing towards the needy, and, you know, as the reports come in now, he is much loved, and there's been a whole rethinking of one's attitude towards the papacy and what can be achieved there, more like a real man of Christ. You know, back in around 1980, it was supposed to be that there was an overshadowing of the Pope by the Master Jesus. If it did occur, it seemed to be a short-lived experiment, but maybe again the experiment is undertaken. A real man of the people. He's the Sagittarian, actually. He seems to be pretty blunt in what he says, and he certainly has his opinions, but Cancerian in his ascendant, so he has that common touch and cares for the people. Maybe years after this program has been made, maybe we'll see things differently, we'll know more. Interestingly, in some of the lore, he is said to be the last Pope, at least in some of the prophecies. We'll see whether that is truly the case. The last Pope, the last Dalai Lama, what period are we entering? So it's that sense of doing as the Christ did. It's sixth ray, it's Saturnian, it's I must conform to what he did, I must do this out of a sense of duty, but not from a spontaneous heart response. A heart response, not necessarily just a solar plexus response. The essential quality for service is therefore lacking, and that is, what is it, you know? Spontaneous love. And from the start they failed to do more than make certain gestures in conformity with their understanding of the gestures made by the Christ. Service can likewise be rendered from a deep-seated desire for spiritual perfection. Well, here comes the spiritual ambition. I want to be spiritually perfect, so therefore I know service is required to achieve spiritual perfection. Therefore I will serve. For what motive? In order to be spiritually perfect. It is regarded as one of the necessary qualifications for discipleship, and therefore, if one is to be a disciple, one must serve. So one really wants to be a good disciple, a perfect disciple. Again, the eyes are upon the self, right? Little self. Eyes are upon the little self. This theory is correct, but the living substance of service is lacking. What is that substance? What is that substance? Is energy, right? So, is energy, and the energy required is spontaneous, outgoing love in action. The ideal is right and true and meritorious, yes, but the motive behind it is entirely wrong. So we really do have to question our motives for service. We have to serve the plan, right? Then serve those whom the plan serves. and then, only then, serve those who serve the plan. Puts things in the proper proportion. Many people serve, of course, through spontaneous love. They don't really have any idea of the plan, but a still higher mode of service would be to serve with spontaneous love and have the knowledge of what the plan is and how it must be manifested in particular. So the motive behind this mode of service is entirely wrong. Notice how DK oftentimes, before telling us what a thing is, tells us what it isn't. And this kind of prepares the mind and is eliminative in its approach. It works very well. The ideal is right and true. Let's see. But the motive behind it all is entirely wrong. Service can also be rendered yet another. Is this the sixth? Because it is becoming increasingly the fashion and the custom to be occupied with some form of service. The tide is on. So like social pressure to serve in order to be well regarded by those who are under the same pressure. Well, even the fact that this pressure exists is a positive thing. But again, motive is the key. Everybody is actively serving in welfare movements, in philanthropic endeavors, in Red Cross work, which Master DK is behind, we've been told, in educational uplifts, and in the task of ameliorating distressing world conditions. All this is very good. I just turned on the television the other day and I saw, some of the very famous pop stars embracing really important movements. Madonna, let's say. I don't know when, if you hear this 20 years from now, I don't know where Madonna will be. She has a certain survivability. But she's into this education for girls all over the world, regardless of oppressive conditions. She's throwing her whole Leo self into that. It's a wonderful thing. Are there mixed motives, whatever? Anyway, she's throwing her power into that. She's a person of great self-expression, and without an education it's so difficult to express yourself. The tide is on, and I'm respecting her for it right now. People respect those who serve, and they achieve even a higher social status, even a higher reputation. It is fashionable to serve in some way. Service gives a sense of power. Service brings one friends, one's fellow servers, and the groups that one serves, they love, they adore, they appreciate. Service is a form of group activity, and frequently, of course, this is done through serving groups. There was just the great Philippine hurricane, hugely devastating, and many groups mustered the aid for the Philippines. Even the American military, well, whatever the motive, was there providing relief, group activity, and frequently brings far more to the server in a worldly sense than to the serves. One sometimes looks out on the world and sees men of huge wealth. I think there was a man, Warren Buffett, just, as they say, worth billions and billions of dollars, and he is, how much of his legacy has he committed to charity? Almost the whole of it, and encouraging other hugely wealthy individuals to assign at least 50% of their wealth to human betterment. I think he left very little to his children. I don't know. That's the story that I heard. People of great wealth doing very serviceable things and gaining. Maybe they have pure motive. Maybe some of them really do have pure motive, but also gaining from it in the social sense. You know how it is when you see somebody just raking it in hand over fist, and they just live selfishly with what they have acquired. Well, what is your thought and feeling towards such people? Then you see these same people turn around and give it all back, or most of it back, into worthy efforts. Look at Andrew Carnegie. I mean, you know, maybe he was a rough and tough robber baron in the 19th century, but, you know, look at all those libraries he endowed, and look at the educational possibilities that he rendered possible. So, yes, there may be mixed motive, but there certainly is, who's to judge the motive of such people? We're not inside their psyche. I'm sure there are some very pure streams, but there are some who serve for what it can bring to them. They know it's good policy to serve. Some of the most selfish people that you will see in a political sense and in a social sense are also known as philanthropists. Well, but perhaps they choose very well their charities. I looked up some people the other day, and I thought, well, these people are really not doing well for society, because they seem to be against the poor, and they seem to be impoverishing the middle class and enriching themselves. And yet I see that some of the very first ways they are described is as philanthropists. So this discernment of motive is a key thing. First within ourselves. Let us be sure of our own motives, and then, you know, go on to the motives of others. And yet, in spite of all this, which indicates wrong motives and false aspiration towards unworthy objectives, we might say, service is of a kind, is constantly and readily being rendered. DK puts in of a kind. Well, it may not be as good as it could be, as pure as it could be, but people are being helped by others. A loving relationship of some kind over the long term is being established, and helping is contagious. Even a person with wrong motives who begins to help will find that the energy is flowing, and it's a joy to assist. Excuse me, and that assistance will direct them towards a better motive, and they will lose their selfishness in the process. Humanity is on its way to a right understanding of services or service. I don't know, this could be one of those typos. It is becoming responsive to this new law, and is learning to react to the steadily imposing will of that great life who informs the constellation Aquarius. Because indeed there are lords of constellations. Some people have just figured the constellations are just aggregates of stars and are quite material, and whereas a solar logos may be informed by a great life, a constellation is not. But DK gives us other indications. There are constellation logoi. So, constellational logoi. Just as our solar logos informs our solar system, and our planetary logos informs our Earth planet. Our Earth planet. Meaning there's more to the demonstration of the planetary logos than his planet. At least on the outer levels. He has an entirely internal manifestation as well. So just as our solar logos, there are constellation logoi, there are lords of the constellations, Lord of the constellation Aquarius. I once went collecting them, and he mentioned several. Is it the Lord of the constellation Aries, Lord of the constellation Libra? Maybe here we have informing the life of the constellation Aquarius, in the great life. Well, a galaxy is a great life. There's such a mystery about life, because that which is a unitary being is also simultaneously a complex being. It has many parts, each of which thinks it's its own being. So the great puzzle of the one and the many is solved by us over time. Right. Okay. I hope there will not be these little droppings of the audio track because things fade in and out on this program, and I only notice it maybe a few seconds later. I once closed my eyes in meditation, and I realized I probably had missed about 5 or 6 minutes of non-connection because I had my eyes closed and I didn't see the report that the audio connection had been dropped. But anyway, onward. The idea of service is, at this time, the major idea to be grasped, for in grasping it, we open ourselves wide to the new incoming influences. So it's almost as if to say that if we serve properly, we will be aligning ourselves with the energy of the constellation Aquarius. The law of service, the new incoming influence. I mean, there are many incoming energies. I think we only really know a few. Sometimes DK hints at how many energies there are for which we have no name and for which we have no real recognition. The law of service is the expression of the energy of a great life, who in cooperation with Him, in whom we live and move and have our being, and that could be the solar logos, or more likely the planetary logos in this context, is subjecting the human family, no choice in the matter, subjecting the human family to certain influences and streams of energy which will eventually do 3 things. Now, notice again, certain influences and streams of energy. We don't know the specifics of these. We just say, okay, the Aquarian energy, but what is involved in that? Remember, these are great composite beings. They have different stars in them, different solar logi in them. We consider an influence to be unitary when in fact it is multiple. Well, in one day we will learn about the multiplicity of that which is given. I mean, we talk about the energy of the constellation Scorpio. Well, how many solar logi are involved in this constellation? They often call it Scorpius, okay. And each one of them making a contribution to what we, in general, call the Scorpio energy, and thus it is with all of these constellations. They are multipartite in a way, and yet we call them sort of one thing. And we learn to recognize different aspects of this one thing, but we don't necessarily know the source of these different aspects. We say, well, that's just part of the Scorpio energy, but maybe there's a specific source within that constellation which is the origin of that energy. That could very well be. So what happens when this great being impresses itself upon Him in whom we live and move and have our being? What are the results? What happens? The heart center in all aspirants and disciples will awaken. Well, usually you say Leo is the heart, but Aquarius is closely related also. So we are entering into an age of the heart, not just an age of the solar plexus, perhaps during the age of Pisces, even though the constellation brings in the secondary energy, it has a lot of 6th ray associated with it. And perhaps the solar plexus of aspiration was more stimulated than the heart, though since the appearance of Christ through the initiate Jesus, this has been growing greatly. Very needed, very needed. Who knows what the Christ saw about the potential future of humanity unless he agreed to anchor the will of God in a way that was in accordance with the will of God and not with his own plans. Talk about, in a way, giving up your own ideas. From the high master and head of the hierarchy, he subordinates his ideas to those of the of Sanat Kumara, which are higher yet, and which he recognizes as of still greater value. You might say, well, if he can do that, I mean, certainly the example is set for us. Well, what else happens? Enable emotionally polarized humanity to focus intelligently in the mind, because after all, Aquarius is a fifth ray, let's see, how would this would work? Fifth ray sign, and it has much of the third ray in it as well. It is a sign of mentality and the relation of the opposites, the two wavy lines understood in relation to each other, and the transfer of the energy of the solar plexus into the heart. All of this will be possible under the impress of the law of service, and as that great, the energy of this great life, which is the life, I believe, of the Constellation Aquarius, moves into increasing power. So, awakening the heart center in all aspirants and disciples, this is going to happen. Enabling humanity, which is emotionally polarized eventually, to move into the mind. So we can imagine an age of universal education where real mental training becomes possible. It is not demonstrating in the masses now, except maybe the masses in certain areas of the globe, and transfer energy from the solar plexus to the heart. All of this possible under Aquarius, the Lord of the Constellation Aquarius. All of this is possible under the Lord of the Constellation Aquarius. This unfolding of what we might call the consciousness of the heart, or the development of true feeling. Notice how true feeling is connected with the heart. Sometimes we say feeling is only of the solar plexus. Master Mordia uses the term feeling in the same way, and he encourages its cultivation. It's not just a solar plexus thing. It has to do with the heart center. This unfolding of what we might call the consciousness of the heart, or the development of true feeling, is the first step towards group awareness. We have to be heart sensitive to be truly group aware. Okay. Have to be heart sensitive to be group aware. This unfolding of what we might call the consciousness of the heart and the development of true feeling is the first step towards group awareness. The group is called together under the heart. The heart is a group organ. We remember that. The heart is a, quote, group organ, and is related to group consciousness and not to the individual consciousness. This group awareness and this identification with the feeling aspect of all groups is the quality which leads to service. So many important statements made here. One could ponder on them a long time instead of just passing them. This group awareness and this identification with the feeling aspect of all groups, the first couple of meditations in Dhyana 2 are meant together to cultivate the feeling aspect within the group. They are to sensitize, harmonize the astral body of the group that uses the meditation. And this leads to service as the masters render it. It leads to service, the service to be rendered as the masters render it, and as the Christ demonstrated it for us in Galilee. Interesting that he uses that term. He doesn't use Israel, he doesn't use Palestine, he uses the term Galilee. Sometimes he uses the term Palestine. So, the consciousness of the heart and the development of true feeling, not just personal, biased, solar plexus feeling, but inclusive, loving feeling, which spreads around to all and includes all. It is a true feeling, let's say it is inclusive. And true group awareness involves this consciousness of the heart and true love. Otherwise, there is no true group consciousness. So we see how much, we're told that Aquarius leads to the development of universal love. We're told of Pisces, pervasive wisdom, and yet it seems to be a sign of great love in many ways. And of Aquarius, we're told universal love. So this is the beginning. We've seen so many different ways in which Aquarius can manifest, including this regimenting, impositional standardization, all the way up to the great service of the Christ, based upon his universal love. So now DK is interpolating some other factors. He tends to do this. When there have been questions submitted on psychology, he included them in the psychology book. He included his answers in the Psychology 1 book. And here are some questions on service. Were they submitted? There were questions on healing from the healing group, and his answers were included. So let's see what these questions may be. Therefore, the service rendered today is what it is because of the response to these new Aquarian influences, because the response to these new Aquarian influences is being registered at present in the astral body and is working out through the solar plexus. We have an emotional form of service today. It's certainly better than nothing. This accounts for the emotional nature of most of the service rendered in the world at this time. We are moved by our emotions to serve. Moved by our emotions to serve. It is responsible for the hatred engendered by those who react sensitively to suffering. It stays in the realm of the astral vehicle, doesn't it? Because of their emotional identification with suffering. And because of that, they lay the blame for the distressing conditions encountered upon a person or group of persons, and then whom they then hate. So it does not rise into the realm of an inclusive, understanding mind, influenced by inclusive soul consciousness. Well, the waters of life, the astral waters are also sensitive, and there is a connection between the Buddhic plane, where the true Aquarian energy should be at work, and the astral plane. And we are, as a human race, largely emotionally focused. We have only to watch the demonstrations in the street of various countries to see how very emotionally focused we are. So the sensitivity can lead to hatred and the desire for revenge against those who cause harm and distress to those with whom we are identified. So because of this solar plexus reception of the energy of Aquarius, this reception is responsible also for the generally unsatisfactory nature of much of that which is now being done to relieve conditions. It's maybe, should we say, not well thought through. It is unsatisfactory from the higher angle of the soul. Maybe we can say that its long-range benefits do not occur as they might if the service were based upon soul understanding. So we rush forth to serve because we are animated by an emotional impulse, and yet our effectiveness is somewhat diminished because we do not have soul vision of the situation. Okay. When, however, that service rendered is based upon mental response, when the service rendered is based upon a mental response to humanity's need, then the whole problem is lifted out of the veil of illusion, or especially of glamour, and out of the valley of the world glamour, yes. Well, you know, we're talking about higher mental response, I might say, or at least the mind is influenced by the soul. Then the impulses to serve are registered in the heart center. This is so important. The impulses to serve are registered in the heart center and not in the solar plexus. And I suppose we can tell the difference, can't we, if we've had both types of impulses. And when this is more generally the case, we shall have a happier and more successful demonstration of service. It's, you know, so often the solar plexus response is for the purpose of rendering the server more satisfied, or more comfortable, or less distressed, as DK has said. The solar plexus senses this in harmony, and whether or not it's truly helpful and intelligent response, at least it relieves this sense of distress and dissonance which is occurring in the solar plexus. But when the mind and the heart are combined in how the service is to be rendered, directing how the service is to be rendered, then, as he says, a happier and more successful demonstration of service. In this treatise, I seek to be intensely practical. Well, maybe a little different from the cosmic fire approach, which laid out the grand structure, but here we're into application. It is a second ray treatise, these 5 books on the seven rays, but it involves also the action of the third ray, and what is given is to be applied. So I seek to be intensely practical, for this new science of service must be based on right foundations and on sound understanding. So easy to rush forth into service in a way that is not really service and not really effective. So we have to have this intellectual, academic understanding also of service, so we know how to evaluate what we have called service heretofore, and perhaps not fall into the traps of thinking we are serving when in fact we are not really doing so. Perhaps the simplest way in which I can handle a theme so new and yet so hackneyed, it's really new in its essential meaning, or the appreciation of that meaning by people, but it's hackneyed in terms of its constant repetition, is by formulating certain questions and then answering them as fully and concisely as possible. How do we define the word service? What is the field of service, and what is the field of this science, rather? What is the field of this science, and why do we call it a science? Remember how scientific the sign Aquarian is with this very prominent 5th ray. It's the ray which is given as transmitted by the Lord of the constellation at this time. So why do we call it a science? What are the characteristics of the true server? Well, he certainly told us what they are not. What effect does service have on the mind, on the emotions, on the etheric body, of those served, I presume, and of the server? And does this science prove that the 7 key or ray types, 7 key types, each key a tone, each ray a tone. The 7 key types, the 7 major types, maybe a key is to be turned 7 times here, or ray types employ distinctive methods in their service. And this is a very valuable area for consideration, the 7 modes of service. Perhaps we will recognize these modes as we study. I always like to go back to them because they are they're so very unusual in their expression. They may not at all be what we have suspected of the ray types of service. So, let's at least begin, and then we can continue afterwards. The consideration of these questions will enable me to do 3 things. Okay, so number 1, show in my answers to each question that service is not a sentiment or an ideal. The mind can certainly be much affected by the emotions, and we have a chemomonastic response. An ideal oftentimes reaches out of this world and fails to be applied. It's not a sentiment or an ideal, but that it is an effect and a scientific procedure at the same time. So indeed we are having from DK a very different formulation, a reformulation of what service really is. And this will, it's 80 years ago that this was written. This should be reformulating our conceptions. And by now we should certainly have been applying what we have read for so many years. So it's not of the astral plane. It's not related to emotional idealism. That idealism may have a part in it, but that's not the real thing. It is an effect of something higher. What is that effect? And a scientific procedure at the same time. There is a method with predictable results. So what will DK be able to do? We're talking about 3 things he will be able to do. He'll be able to indicate the need today for the right understanding of a technique which, when applied by the new group of world servers, will lead humanity into the world of true meaning, and real values, that is the world of the soul. The world of meaning and the world of true values, the world of the soul. Of soul. And I will seek to show how the new group of world servers will work. Well, they are certainly gathering at this time. I look at the soul of China under the sign Taurus and consider, a soul of Canada too really, and consider that the new group of world servers is ruled by that sign, and I wonder how these countries these cities whose soul nature is ruled by Taurus, the same sign, will function in relation to the new group of world servers. Maybe they will be especially able to sponsor practical work of the new group of world servers after some decades have elapsed. Right now we're still in a very testing, proving time, sort of running the gauntlet, as it were. So he'll indicate the need today for right understanding which will of a technique which will lead humanity into the world of the soul. He will also give some idea of how certain groups of the masters of the wisdom serve upon the planet at this time. We have certain ideas about how the masters serve, and maybe are oftentimes surprised to realize that their service is other than we thought and far more extensive. The service is often far more extensive and other than we thought. And DK, even in Initiation Human and Solar, he does talk about how some of the masters serve, and in ways which may prove somewhat surprising to us. In answering these questions, we will proceed to take them one by one. Now, I'm tempted not to go on, but to start this in a new program. And I think I will be able to do that. We can call this the end of Laws of the Soul webinar commentaries number 12. And it was, well, we're on page 124 already. And we began this, I believe, on page 118. So, I want to get those straight, so the content that I provide will be a good indication of what is contained in these programs, but of course not a detailed indication. That would be impossible. So, we are here from 118 to 124. And we will start this next one, beginning of Laws of Soul, webinar commentaries number 13, 124 onward. So practical. DK has said so, right? He wants to be intensely practical in this section of esoteric psychology. The laws of the soul are the laws by which all of us must learn to live, and they are, he tells us elsewhere, abstruse. They are not easily understood. That's why he's taking such labor to redefine these things in a manner to which we are perhaps not accustomed. So we have to have a whole new mindset about what he's attempting to bring forward and restructure our conception of these foundational impulses of the soul, which are really foundational laws of the soul by which we must guide our lives. What I'd like to do here now is end with the great invocation. And that will take us just about to the 2 hours that we need on this program. So, from the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, friends, good. We will continue with number 13 and work our way forward. Some of these stanzas in the Laws of the Soul we've done all the law of repulse stanzas. That was an earlier program, so we won't do them in such detail when we get to the fourth law, or I'll recommend you to the commentary that I already made about them. But for now, we're going forward step by step, at least through the first 5. Well, we'll go through all 7, but the first 5 which we can somewhat understand, and the last 2 laws of the soul, which are more difficult to understand and about which he wrote far less. So we'll see you soon, and we will continue. Okay, all the best. Study hard. Meditate well. Progress. Here we go.